This is where I came after it happened to think about it, and this is where I'll tell the story. It was Saturday morning and it was beautiful out. The sun was shining. My family were so happy for the weekend. We had just finished a long work week and I had been staying at my parents' house. I came down for breakfast and my dad had made us all this really nice breakfast. He had cut up fruit and made homemade granola and yogurt. He'd just gone out of his way. And I remember sitting around talking with my parents and laughing, and my brother. My sister hadn't joined us yet. I thought she had been sleeping in. We all assumed she was sleeping in. And I decided after breakfast that I was gonna head up to the gym to go work out. So I grabbed my stuff, got in the car, and headed up to the gym. While I was on the expressway, I was about to get off the exit. That's when the phone rang. That's the phone call that changed everything. So my sister and I, we were a couple years apart growing up, and because of that, we loved each other very much, but we also fought all the time. I remember fighting over stupid stuff like clothing. One morning, I remember her sneaking into my room because she thought I was asleep and she was gonna borrow one of my shirts to wear to school. And I remember her crawling across my floor so softly, thinking she could get away with it. And I shot up in bed and I said, "I gotcha!" And then she grabbed the shirt and ran out anyways. And of course, what follows is one of those, "Mom!" So we had regular sister moments like that. I also have beautiful memories. I remember one night we had been praying for a snow day so we could get off school, and it finally started snowing. And I remember running out into the court where we lived, and my sister and I, we were just throwing snowballs at each other and laying in the snow, making snow angels. It was beautiful. And then I have a distinct memory of the next day. My sister had really been into Spice Girls at the time, and she loved platform shoes, and she had a bunch of them. And I didn't have a pair of snow boots to play in the snow with, and so I borrowed some of her platform shoes, and I went outside because they were higher than the snow. They were big. And I was walking in the snow, and of course she was mad. We were fighting about that, but she loved me. So I have many good memories of my sister. She also was a gymnast. She loved to do gymnastics, and she also did cheerleading. And so I have a memory of us, actually lots of memories of us in our living room at home, doing gymnastics together, doing cartwheels on the carpet, her practicing her back handsprings. So a lot of just beautiful memories of my sister. So Megan was never afraid to speak her mind. She loved telling you the honest truth about something, even if it hurt. She felt things very deeply. And when she went to high school, we were a couple of years apart, as I said, so I was a senior and she was a freshman. And the impact of high school on her was pretty hard, especially with peer pressure, joining the cheerleading team. Some of the girls were downright cruel to her. They would say mean things. It made her very body conscious. She struggled off and on with eating disorders. And then she also got involved in drinking alcohol more and more frequently. She would go to parties after games and drink alcohol. At the time, my parents and as we were all trying to intervene and make sure that my sister got any help that she needed and was kept out of those situations, but she just had a lot of struggles. So Megan cared a lot about getting good grades, taking care of her body, and she actually graduated with straight A's from high school. Cheerleading, still doing it, doing amazing, but she was a slave to her addictions in some ways. She had started more and more frequently trying to medicate her own feelings. A lot of the time in high school it was with alcohol, and that became a slippery slope for her, and we tried everything we could to get her help. So my parents started making her attend AA meetings, and when she got out of high school, she actually flew out to California to go to college and live with her boyfriend at the time. And I think she just still struggled with the same issues. And any time that she had relationship issues or emotional issues of any sort, she found different ways to medicate. And that started coming with substance abuse. And our family, we spent years supporting my sister in and out of rehabs, trying to be there for her. We would watch her get clean and then relapse. And the pain that my parents went through during that time was just excruciating for them. They didn't know all the ways to do the tough love. They didn't know how much do you give the person, how much do you withhold. And they had all the people at the rehab centers and different places working with them to try and help. And we gave Megan everything we could. There were so many close calls where I got a phone call when I was going through college that I rushed straight home because she was hospitalized because she had overdosed on pills. And I thought that was the end. They said with her liver levels that she shouldn't have survived, that they didn't think she was going to make it through the week. And I remember asking everybody I knew to pray and just pray desperately for my sister. And they did. And she would have this miraculous recovery. And she made it. And there was another time where later on she was with another guy. And he had exposed her to heroin when she had been passed out from alcohol. And after that, her addiction to heroin had started rearing its ugly head. And Megan, I remember where she had collapsed after taking the drug, and she had collapsed in an Indian style position, and it had created a tourniquet on her legs, and she was hospitalized, and they told her, you will never be able to walk again. And they didn't even know if she would survive that one. And I remember sitting with her in the hospital at Christmas where she thought she would be paralyzed for life and in a wheelchair. And she so desperately wanted to be rid of this addiction and its hold over her. And she just begged and pleaded and just wanted to be done with it. And there were times where she felt like she had broken free, and then an emotional trigger or something would happen to just reel her right back in again. And she spent months and months at rehab centers. And finally, she had spent a long time at one particular rehab center, and she got out and she had been clean, and it seemed like we finally had hope for the future. She looked healthy. The days where she was most held captive by the disease, I didn't even recognize my sister. There was a few months where she had disappeared. We didn't know what had happened to her, and she reappeared. You could see her ribs. Her eyes looked hollow underneath, like somebody in a concentration camp. Her cheeks were sunken in almost like a skull, like you could see the skull underneath. It was horrific to see her, and we rushed her to the hospital that night, and they said again her levels were so bad and so low that she was knocking on death's door. And that is when we put her in the rehab for that final time, where she seemed to make a full turnaround. She had been months and months and months in there, and she came out and she looked like herself again. She had put weight back on. She had a normal color to her skin. She was happy. She hugged us all. She was so, so happy to be alive. She was so grateful to feel like she had finally kicked the disease. And she re-enrolled in college here in our city in Louisville. She got into a nursing program. And to do that, you had to have top-notch grades, and she had, undergraduate studies, and she was even attending classes in the nursing program. She was working on her degree. She was doing practicums where she was visiting with patients, and she said to us, her family, she cared so much about these people, and she wanted to help people who had gone through difficulties and trouble and trauma because of what she had gone through. And she just seemed so full of joy and life. And I remember just during that time thinking how happy I was to have my sister back. There were nights where we would just, I remember one night she and I sat around and we were joking with my brother and we were playing charades and we were so happy. And then it all ended. I got the phone call. I was on the expressway headed towards the gym, and my mom called, and she was screaming hysterically, and she said, "Morgan, Morgan, she's dead. She's dead. Get back home now. Your sister's dead." And I had never heard that tone in her voice before, the pitch of it, and I was in shock. I didn't understand. I said, I don't understand. What do you mean? What do you mean she's dead? What's going on? What are you talking about? And she couldn't say anything else. She just kept repeating over and over again, "She's dead, she's dead." And I hung up the phone and I got off the exit and I turned right around and I spun back towards home. And I ended up apparently beating the ambulances there because my parents, they had gone up to my sister's room because she hadn't come down for breakfast. It had been a while. They were starting to wonder. And my dad had gone up to knock on her door and nobody was answering. And he tried for about 15 minutes. And then finally he got a key, opened up the door, and that's where they found her. She had fallen out of her bed. She was wearing a sports bra and the strap had kind of caught on one of the bed railings. And she was hanging, lifeless. Just hanging there. And if you've known anybody who's overdosed, it's very ugly and brutal. Sometimes the victims vomit, and she had a pool of her own vomit. It was black beneath her. And when I arrived home, this is in the middle of February, it was freezing out, and my brother, he was in the driveway just pacing back and forth. No jacket on. He was middle school age at the time. He was much younger than us. I mean, I was an adult out of my own. My sister was 22. And he was just going back and forth in the driveway. He didn't know what to do. So I pulled in. The ambulances weren't there yet. I grabbed him, ran inside, and that's where I found my parents upstairs. My mom was just screaming hysterically. My dad was trying to give my sister CPR. And then I remember the paramedics came. They pulled up and they ran upstairs and they just, started beating on her lifeless body in that room. My dad was holding my mom to the side while she almost couldn't even stand. She was collapsing. All her weight was on him. The way she was crying, nobody's ever heard that before. And it seemed like they weren't going to get a pulse. And then finally, they got something. It was the faintest pulse. And because of that, they decided to go ahead and take her in the ambulance to the hospital. And I remember them just carrying her out on a stretcher. And my parents and we piled in my car. I drove because my parents were in no condition to drive. And I was in the front seat, they were in the back seat. My dad was holding my mom and preparing to tell her, just saying over and over again, "Our baby's dead. She's dead." And we arrived at the hospital and the guy told us it was not good. She was in critical condition, but they had gotten a slight heartbeat. So they had hooked her up to life support. And the machines were going, but she never really regained consciousness. And for the next day, for the next 24 hours,
We watched as all her levels declined, her brain activity declined, her organs, her liver levels, all of it declined. And towards the end of the 24 hours, it started getting where every hour or so, she was having heart attacks and coding. Her body was failing. And they came to my parents and they said, we have to make a decision. Her heart's gonna keep failing. It's gonna get worse and worse. At what point do you want us to do not resuscitate? And so my dad and my mom and my brother, we all gathered in a hospital room. They had a separate room that was empty. And my dad asked me to pray. And he said, Morgan, I need us to talk to God and decide if we let her go. And I did. And we all held each other. And we decided to tell them that we weren't going to save her, because there was nothing left to save. All of her body was dying, every part of it. So we walked into her body that was laying in the hospital bed. It was still hooked up to the machines. We each took turns coming up to her, holding her hands and saying goodbye. And when I touched my sister, her body felt so cold. It was so cold and lifeless. And I told her I loved her. I loved her so much. And that I'm sorry, I'm so sorry that we couldn't save her. And I said goodbye. And I prayed too, I don't even remember what. And they turned off the life support. And she had another heart attack. And it's not pretty when they have a heart attack. Their body starts convulsing, and when they had to try to resuscitate her, they had to beat on her chest, almost breaking ribs, to revitalize her. So this time, her body started convulsing. And it stopped. The line, the heart rate line stopped. It went flat. And it was over. And she was gone. And my family sat around and we watched this person that we had loved, that we had supported, that we had tried so hard to help break free from her addiction, who had been clean for so many months. She seemed like it was all going to be better now. We watched her die. And it was one choice, one relapse that took it there. And I tell this story because there are people out there right now that look like you and me. It's not somebody in some back alley. There are people dying from overdoses. There are people dying from addiction. And we need to support the people that we see around us struggling with that. You need to grab hold of your loved ones struggling with that. You need to keep fighting, and it's not easy. Oh, that fight for her life was not easy. And in the end, we failed. Failed in the sense that we didn't save her. We didn't fail in loving her. We loved her with everything we had. My sister had a symbol that she had tattooed on her shoulder, and it was a butterfly. And she told us that butterflies meant hope to her. They meant transformation. And they meant that anybody could change. And I believe that. I believe that anybody struggling with addiction out there can find hope, and I believe they can change. And our family, our story, this is what it is now. And we take what it is, and we've started a nonprofit. We try and give back. My mother started butterfly backpacks, because when my sister was in the rehab center, she needed a backpack to carry her goods and supplies, and she didn't have any supplies because many of them don't. Some people go to those centers from jail, and she needed that. And so my mom, the first Christmas after we lost her, she decided to start something with the money that she would have spent on my sister. And she filled backpacks and she took them to the rehab center where my sister had been. And she filled them with all these essential items. And we filled them with letters of kindness and encouragement. And later on, my brother wrote a letter, my sister, to my sister, what he would have said. I wrote a letter, and we give those back today with Butterfly Backpacks. And if you want to know more about that, you can always go to butterflybackpacks.com to see how my mom's supporting that ministry. But I just hope that this video brings hope to someone. And I don't know if this is your story or someone you know has this story, but keep fighting. Keep fighting for the ones you love. Hug them tight. Tell them you love them. If it's your brother or sister, for me it's my sister. And I will love her till the day I die. I love you, Megan. And you are missed. I miss you so much. And I won't see you again this side of heaven. But I hope by telling your story that we can save others and we can honor your memory. We miss you.